Hello everyone, my name is Renato Costa, this is Aussie Law, and today we will look at the preamble to the Australian Constitution. If you haven't done so already, I would kindly ask you to subscribe to our channel and to like this video, because this will make us grow and then the content will get to more people. And also, if you do subscribe, you can receive notifications, and then every time I upload a new video, you'll be informed of it. So let's get to the preamble. There is a general debate about the preamble to the Constitution, and this happens all over the world. Some scholars say that the preamble is part of the Constitution, that it belongs to the Constitution. But in fact, they are in the minority. The majority of constitutional scholars considers the preamble to the Constitution something outside of the Constitution, not in it, not something that belongs to the Constitution, not to the core of the Constitution, but outside of it. So the preamble is not constitutional in its content, but it can still help us understand more about the Constitution. Think of the preamble as a guidance, as a roadmap that helps us understand and interpret the Constitution better. So here's the first thing that I want you to know. The preamble is not part of the Constitution, but it does help us understand and interpret the Constitution. In fact, the Australian Constitution doesn't even have a preamble. The preamble to the Australian Constitution is the preamble to the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act, and that is an act of the British Parliament. If you want to know more about it, just click the video in the link in the card that is appearing on the screen, and then that will take you to our previous video where we explained the differences between the Australian Constitution and the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act. But to say that the Australian Constitution doesn't have a preamble is just overly technical, okay? So don't bother about it. So let's take a look at the preamble to the Australian Constitution. There are many things there that I want to highlight and are very important. And I'm using this book here as the source to guide you through the preamble. You can actually buy this book using the link that I provided there in the description of the video. The first couple of interesting things will come out of just reading the very first words of the preamble. So take a look at it. Whereas the people of New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland and Tasmania humbly relying on... Wait, where is Western Australia? During the drafting of the Constitution, the states, the former colonies, could propose alterations and suggestions to that draft. And when the draft was taken to England, Western Australia, the former colony, hadn't yet decided if they were going to participate, if they were going to join the other states or not to form the Australian Commonwealth. That's why Western Australia is not in the preamble. But that doesn't really change anything today. As I said, the preamble is used to interpret the Constitution. It is not constitutional in itself. So it helps us to understand the context and the history of the time, but it doesn't dictate the fact that Western Australia is indeed a state and is currently part of the Australian Commonwealth. But that first part also tells us something more. It says that the Commonwealth is an arrangement of the people. It was the people of the states who formed the Commonwealth. Again, I would refer you to that video that explained the differences between the Australian Constitution and the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act, because in that video I actually talk about the fact that although the act is an act of the British Parliament, the drafting of the Constitution and the Australian Constitution was made by the people of Australia for Australians. And this is pretty clear here in the preamble. But another thing that I want you to notice is that the mention there is for the people of the states. That means that the colonies came together and formed this new state. So the former colonies are becoming smaller states, and these states are coming together and forming this bigger state called the Commonwealth of Australia. This movement of coming together is called aggregation. It is one of the ways in which a federation comes into existence. We say a federal country is born by aggregation when former colonies, former independent states come together and form this new Commonwealth, in our case the Commonwealth of Australia. We say that a federation is created by devolution when the opposite happens, when there is a unitary state and that state is subdivided into different states. This is the case of federations like Brazil, where I'm from. So the fact that Australia is a federation also implies that the constituent states operate as mutually independent, self-governing political communities, while at the same time collectively united into the larger national governing community. I won't say much more about federalism because I really want to record some other videos specifically about it. Federalism is a very important principle and one of the fundamental principles of the Australian Constitution. And if you want to be notified when I do upload a video about federalism, you have to subscribe to the channel. Okay, let's turn back to the preamble. It says, whereas the people of the states, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God, have agreed to unite in one indissoluble federal commonwealth under the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and under the Constitution hereby established. Did you realize how the preamble said that the states were forming one indissoluble federal commonwealth? So there you have it, feature number 3. The federal union is indissoluble. What does that mean? It means that the states do not have the option of ending the federation. Unilaterally, they cannot dissolve the federal commonwealth. Although it would be possible for new states to come and join in, the constituent states cannot unilaterally just choose to leave and dissolve the federation. The fourth interesting thing that I want you to realize here in the preamble to the Australian Constitution is in the fact that the federal commonwealth is under the crown of Great Britain. So Australia is a constitutional monarchy. I know. A lot of voices are increasingly claiming for Australia to become a republic. There has even been a referendum asking people if they wanted Australia to become a republic. But the fact is that Australia is a parliamentary monarchy, it is under the British Crown, and it should be interpreted according to it. In practice and in reality, we do know that the monarchy doesn't really have any say here in Australia. That is why Australia is called a crowned republic, because it really looks like a republic, although constitutionally speaking, it is still a monarchy. So, finally, we have learned that the preamble is not part of the Constitution, but it does help us understand the Constitution better. The preamble also reveals to us that 1. The Constitution was made by the people. Although it was enacted by the British Parliament, it was drafted and made by and for the Australian people. 2. Australia is the result of an aggregation. That is, the former colonies, the states, came together and joined into this union that we call the Commonwealth of Australia. 3. Since Australia is a federal commonwealth, the constituent states cannot just decide to leave and dissolve the federation. And 4, Australia is a constitutional monarchy. It is under the British Crown, but in fact, we know that it is under the rule of law, under the Constitution. So, do you have any questions about the preamble to the Australian Constitution? If you do, do not leave this video without commenting in the section below. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like it and to subscribe to our channel. Until next time, ciao!